Ever wonder if you could control a mental illness? Mental illness is a condition or disorder that affects your mood, behavior, and thinking. This is controlled by a balance of genetics and the environment. We call this nature versus nurture. Scientists have come up with some crazy things lately. Do you think it's possible that they would be able to control a mental illness? To answer this, we start with the DNA, the genetic information present in nearly all living organisms. Every living thing is made up of cells. Within these cells is a nucleus, and in the nucleus we find the DNA. The DNA is made up of a double helix, which looks like a spiral-shaped ladder, representing our entire genetic makeup. Each and every unit of our DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is composed of a phosphate, sugar, and base called a nucleotide. Your DNA is a sequence of nucleotides that are composed of only 4 amino acids: A for adenine, T for thymine, G for guanine, and C for cytosine. There are 3 billion nucleotides in one chain of DNA. This long sequence is broken down into parts that control various characteristics of what makes up you. Your DNA, the 3 billion piece code, is constantly self-replicating. It is translated and copied into what is called the RNA through a process called transcription. The RNA then leaves the nucleus and is used as instructions for your body to follow. It is decoded and made into a chain of amino acids, which are then folded up and made into proteins, which cause your body to function. We call this process translation. So forget English, Spanish, or French. The language of DNA is all you need, as it acts as the universal language of all living things. Now, let's take a closer look at how we inherit these genes. It starts with 2 people who love each other very much. But let's fast forward a bit. As we know, every cell in our body contains our DNA, carrying all of our information. Through sexual reproduction, the sperm from the father meets to fertilize the egg of the mother. Each cell contains 23 chromosomes of DNA from each parent, and when they meet, it produces a zygote, a cell that carries both cells of DNA from each parent. The zygote goes through a process of replicating, dividing, and growing, and eventually out pops a baby who contains the DNA of both their mother and father. Using the information we know about genetics, in 1990, scientists collaborated to produce a map of the entire genetic makeup of humans in order to combat genetic disorders. They called it the Human Genome Project. Through their research, they concluded that they could use DNA sequencing to identify genetic disorders within DNA. They would be able to alter human genetics to combat disorders. However, this brought up many ethical and legal issues. With this knowledge, would we be able to control someone's risk of a mental illness? Let's take a closer look. To start, people who suffer from mental illnesses like depression, anorexia, or Alzheimer's, in general, are not born with these disorders. They are born carrying genes associated to certain conditions, and the interaction of these genes and trigger points in the environment are what influence the disorder. The same situation occurs with mental illnesses like anorexia, bulimia, Alzheimer's, anxiety, alcohol abuse, and more. Scientists have identified several genes that increases a person's vulnerability to these disorders, such as susceptibility to the environment, being gullible, or emotionally sensitive. While we don't have much control in the environment, we now know that we do have control in our genes. This brings us back to the question, can we control or avoid a mental illness? A process that brings us one step closer to this is called epigenetics, or gene therapy, which makes it possible to change your genes. Yes, you heard that right, changing your genes. Through epigenetics, we could be able to control certain characteristics in a person before they're born. This is done by identifying the selected gene in an unborn baby, say brown eye color, cutting it out and inserting the new gene like blue eye color. The modified DNA sequence will then be copied for every other cell in the baby, and here we have a blue-eyed baby. So, can this be done for mental illnesses? The answer is yes. We could simply substitute the gene that makes one more sensitive to the environment and give them a gene that helps them be more prone to trigger points in the environment. However, it wouldn't be possible to completely eliminate the risk of a mental illness due to the strong impact of the environment. So, is it worth it? Imagine you suffered extremely from depression your entire life. Your child has a high possibility of developing this too. Would you genetically modify your child so that they're less prone to this disorder if you had the chance? I think it's a positive pathway to use science to help understand mental health, but using epigenetics as a primary solution to mental illness could lead to many unexpected and possibly life-changing consequences. This includes the lack of individuality, unethical use of procedures, potential abuse of programming individuals, and many more. Instead, before we advance with epigenetics to fix our problems, or avoid them, we should try to improve our environment by working to combat bullying, false advertising, and more. So, yes, we are able to control genetic factors that influence mental illnesses, but before we advance with epigenetics to fix our problems, we should improve our environment and create a healthier and happier world. Thanks for watching.